My son's father decided to destroy my stability out of spite. When I found out I was pregnant at 23 years old, the first thing I felt was not fear, it was disbelief. I remember sitting on the bathroom floor in my small one-bedroom apartment, staring at the white plastic test resting on the edge of the sink, willing the lines to rearrange themselves into something less permanent. They never did. Harry and I had only been together for a year at that point. Our relationship had always felt slightly uneven, though I did not have the language for it back then. He was charming in public, the kind of man who could walk into a room and make people lean toward him without trying. But in private, he had a habit of shrinking me. He corrected small details in my stories. He made jokes about my overreactions. And he rolled his eyes when I expressed anxiety about money. When I told him I was pregnant, he did not look shocked. He looked irritated. He paced my apartment that night, running his hands through his hair as if I had handed him an unexpected bill instead of life-altering news. He did not ask how I felt or sit down beside me. He talked about timing and inconvenience and how he was just getting his footing at work within a week. He had gently begun suggesting that maybe I was not ready to be a mother. Within a month, he was staying at my apartment less often. By the time I was 12 weeks along, he had officially moved back in with his parents to save money. I finished my pregnancy mostly alone. My son Noah was born in early spring. I will never forget the weight of him in my arms, the way his tiny fingers curled instinctively around mine. In that moment, everything in my life rearranged itself. The fear I had once felt about being alone shifted into something fierce and focused. I would not fail him. I did not care how difficult it became. Harry showed up to the hospital. He took pictures and posted one online with a caption about becoming a father. The comments poured in congratulating him. I watched him receive praise. For a role he had not yet stepped into, the first 6 months of Noah's life were a blur of exhaustion and quiet resilience. I returned to work when he was 8 weeks old because I had no choice. Childcare consumed nearly half of my income and rent devoured most of the rest. I stopped buying anything for myself that was not strictly necessary. My wardrobe became a rotation of the same 3 outfits, and my meals were whatever I could assemble quickly between feeding schedules. Harry visited occasionally. He would hold Noah for 20 minutes, take a photo, and leave. He always had somewhere else to be. He contributed financially, but only after I pushed. Every transfer came with a reminder that he was doing his best. The implication was clear. If I struggled, it was because I expected too much. I learned to stop expecting anything. The real trouble began when Noah turned 2. By then, I had built something fragile but functional. I had secured a better position at work, moved into a slightly larger apartment closer to Noah's daycare, and established routines that kept us afloat. Mornings were efficient and evenings were structured. I knew how to stretch a grocery budget. To the last dollar, stability, I learned, is not glamorous. It is quiet, repetitive, and is built from small, disciplined decisions made daily. And Harry hated that I had built it without him at first. His resentment was subtle. He began requesting more time with Noah, but not in a way that felt cooperative. He would demand last-minute schedule changes and would insist on picking Noah up from daycare without informing me until the last second. He began questioning my parenting choices in front of other people, framing them as concerns. He told mutual friends that I was controlling. He told his parents that I kept him from being a full father. The irony was exhausting. I never once denied him access to his son. I only asked for consistency. Consistency, however, would have required him to organize his life around someone other than himself. Instead, he began a different strategy. He decided to destabilize mine. The first time it happened, I almost convinced myself it was accidental. Harry had volunteered to pick Noah up from daycare on a Thursday afternoon. I had an important meeting at work and appreciated the help. At 5:30, I received a call from the daycare director informing me that Noah was still there. Harry had not arrived. I stepped out of my meeting, heart pounding, and called him repeatedly. He did not answer. By the time I raced across town, traffic stretching every minute thinner, the daycare staff was visibly irritated. I apologized profusely, embarrassment burning through me. I promised it would not happen again, Harry texted me. An hour later, saying he had lost track of time. The next incident was more damaging. He insisted on keeping Noah overnight for the first time. I hesitated but agreed. I packed Noah's favorite blanket, his pajamas, and his medication for a mild ear infection. I wrote detailed instructions. When I picked Noah up the next morning, he was flushed and lethargic. His medication bottle was still full. Harry shrugged and said he had forgotten. Noah developed a high fever that afternoon. I missed 2 days of work caring for him. My supervisor called me into her office the following week to discuss attendance reliability. I began to see the pattern. Then every time I regained balance, Harry introduced chaos. He would show up late to exchanges, fail to return items I needed for daycare, and promise financial contributions, but delay them just long enough to trigger overdraft fees. He framed every misstep as a misunderstanding to outsiders. It looked like harmless disorganization. To me, it felt deliberate. Single motherhood is already a high-wire act without a safety net. One missed payment can spiral into cascading consequences. One late pickup can threaten employment, and one sick day can jeopardize credibility. Harry knew this, and he began pulling at the wire. By the time Noah turned 3, I was operating in a constant state of vigilance. My phone never left my hand. My stomach tightened every time Harry's name appeared on the screen, and I had to calculate every possible variable before agreeing to anything involving him. If he offered help, I needed a backup plan. If he promised money, I assumed it would not arrive. If he requested schedule changes, I evaluated how much fallout I could absorb. This was not co-parenting. It was crisis management. The financial strain was relentless. Childcare costs rose, rent increased, and groceries became more expensive. I picked up freelance work at night after Noah fell asleep, typing quietly at the kitchen table while exhaustion blurred the edges of my vision. Harry, meanwhile, began presenting a curated image online of an involved father. He posted photos from occasional park outings. He captioned them with reflections about fatherhood and growth. The comments praised him for stepping up. One afternoon, I received a call from Noah's daycare that made my hands shake. Harry had arrived unannounced and demanded to take Noah early. When the staff explained that only scheduled pickups were permitted, he accused them of overstepping and implied that I had restricted his parental rights. I had done no such thing. The daycare director requested a meeting with me the next morning. I sat in her small office, hands folded tightly in my lap, while she gently explained that they could not be caught in the middle of parental disputes. If the tension continued, they would need legal documentation clarifying custody arrangements. Legal documentation meant court, and court meant money I did not have that night. I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Noah slept beside me, his small body warm and steady. I felt anger then, but not the explosive kind. It was the heavy, suffocating kind. Harry's interference escalated when he learned that I had been considered for a promotion at work. The promotion would have meant a salary increase significant enough to ease some of the pressure. It would have meant fewer freelance nights and breathing room from the childcare expenses. The week my supervisor was finalizing her decision, Harry began requesting emergency schedule swaps. He claimed work conflicts, family obligations, and sudden commitments. Each request forced me to leave early or arrive late. Each disruption chipped at my reliability. On Friday afternoon, my supervisor informed me that while I was capable, the company needed someone with more consistent availability. I nodded and thanked her. I returned to my desk and finished my tasks with steady hands. But I cried in my car after picking up Noah. Harry texted me that evening asking if I could keep Noah an extra weekend because he had last-minute plans. The unfairness of it pressed against my ribs like a weight. Still, I said yes. Noah deserved stability, even if I did not. The breaking point came after I had just dropped Noah off at daycare and arrived at work when I received another call. My heart sank before I answered. Harry had shown up again, but this time, he had told the staff that I was neglecting Noah's emotional needs by limiting his access. He implied instability in my home and suggested that perhaps a different custodial arrangement would be better. The daycare director's voice was calm but firm. She told me they would require official documentation within 2 weeks or Noah's enrollment would be terminated. Termination meant scrambling for new childcare when wait lists were months long. I sat at my desk staring at my computer screen while my world tilted. Harry had found the most vulnerable pressure point in my life and pressed down. That evening I did not cry. Instead, something in me shifted. For 3 years, I had absorbed every inconvenience, every disruption, every strategic lapse disguised as incompetence. I had prioritized peace over confrontation and convinced myself that enduring quietly was strength. But endurance without boundaries is not strength. I looked at Noah that night while he colored at the kitchen table, completely unaware of the instability circling him. His world was small and safe because I had built it that way. Harry was betting that I would continue choosing avoidance over escalation. But he was wrong. For the first time since becoming a mother, I stopped thinking about survival and started thinking about permanence. He had been playing a long game of erosion, but he did not realize that I was capable of playing one too. After the daycare incident, I realized I could no longer operate in reaction mode. My life had been dictated by Harry's whims for years, each disruption eroding the careful balance I had worked to create. But survival instinct is sharper than fatigue, and I was determined to reclaim control. First step was understanding exactly how far his interference extended. I began reviewing every interaction, every missed deadline, every unexpected call or visit. It was not about proving malice yet. It was about seeing the strategy for what it was. Every unannounced pickup, last-minute demand, and financial delay was a thread in the same tapestry. By the time Noah's 4th birthday arrived, Harry had developed a more aggressive approach. He would show up at Noah's school during drop-off, smiling at teachers while muttering complaints about limited access. He would call in the evenings, claiming minor emergencies that forced me to adjust work commitments. I began to dread Fridays, knowing that he would demand the weekend, leaving me scrambling to finish freelance work I had promised weeks ago. But the most insidious tactic was the way he used other people to unsettle me. Mutual friends began sharing stories he framed to make me look controlling or neglectful. Comments on social media painted me as a difficult parent. None of it was overt, none of it could be legally actionable. But it chipped away at my reputation, leaving me second-guessing every decision. I started to see the full picture. Harry had never been interested in fatherhood. He was interested in control. He was determined to prove that I could not manage on my own. And for years I had allowed him to dictate the terms of my life. That realization hit me like a physical force. Years of quiet endurance, sleepless nights, and financial juggling had been viewed by him as weaknesses. For the first time, I allowed myself to feel anger that was not fleeting but deep and steady. I knew for Noah's sake, I needed to act. I began small. Every time he requested a change, I paused instead of immediately accommodating. I refused last-minute pickups that jeopardized my work. I double-checked schedules and created contingency plans that I did not disclose to him. I would not let his chaos dictate my life anymore. One morning, I had scheduled a crucial client meeting, one that could determine whether I would keep the freelance contract I depended on. Harry called 30 minutes before drop-off. He claimed that a relative was unexpectedly in town and demanded to keep Noah for the entire day. I explained, calmly but firmly, that it was not possible and reminded him of the schedule we had agreed upon months ago. He grew agitated. His words, though measured, carried a weight designed to unsettle me. "You're always putting work before him," he said. "Maybe you're not cut out for this." I hung up without responding. My hands trembled, not from fear but from the familiar pulse of determination. I would not argue with him anymore or justify myself. Every confrontation he initiated had always ended in exhaustion on my part. From now on, I would act, not react. Later that day, I picked Noah up from daycare. He was cheerful, oblivious to the tension that lingered around us like a shadow. I watched him climb into the car, his small hands gripping the seatbelt, and felt the weight of responsibility as sharply as ever. This was why I could not falter. Every misstep Harry orchestrated threatened more than my sanity. It threatened Noah's stability. Over the next few months, I implemented a system that was quiet but effective. I ensured all communications with Harry were documented, not for confrontation but for clarity. I organized every financial contribution, every pickup, and every scheduling conflict. My calendar became a fortress of predictability. I adjusted my work hours subtly, relying on my employer's flexibility to create a buffer against his interference. I fortified my routines at home, building small but unshakable pillars of consistency for Noah. Harry noticed. I could see it in the increasingly frantic tone of his voicemails and the impatience in his calls. He could no longer manipulate schedules at whim. Every attempt to destabilize us was countered by the quiet structure I had created. For the first time in years, I felt control not as a fragile illusion but as a tangible force, and yet, his tactics escalated further. When structure failed, he tried undermining perception. He posted photos on social media of brief, staged moments with Noah, captions highlighting precious father-son bonding. Friends and acquaintances began commenting, praising him for involvement. But it did not matter how the world perceived him. What mattered was what Noah experienced daily: consistency, care, and stability. That was the only reality that counted. The final straw came during a weekend when he demanded full custody for a family event. I agreed reluctantly, because it was easier than conflict in public. When Noah returned, he was unusually quiet and withdrawn. In the car, he asked for his favorite blanket, which he claimed Harry had forgotten at the event. My blood ran cold as I realized Harry had intentionally disregarded every small detail necessary for Noah's comfort. Forgetfulness disguised as carelessness had escalated into deliberate disregard. I could no longer tolerate subtle sabotage disguised as benign oversight. I had absorbed years of disruption, strategized around chaos, and endured the erosion of my personal and professional life. After the weekend incident, I understood the situation with crystal clarity. Harry was not a partner, he was an obstacle. Every act of negligence, every missed promise, every calculated inconvenience was part of a pattern. My response could no longer be reactive, piecemeal, or uncertain. I needed a solution that was absolute. I started by consolidating control over Noah's routines. Morning wake-ups, meals, playtime, and bedtime were all structured to perfection. I adjusted daycare pickup and drop-off schedules to ensure minimal interference from Harry, if he requested. Changes, I politely declined, citing schedules that could not be altered. I no longer allowed emotion to dictate compliance. I allowed logistics to dictate reality. Then, I turned to finances. Harry had long delayed contributions under the guise of forgetfulness or inconvenience. I automated childcare payments, utility bills, and groceries wherever possible. Direct deposits from his side became irrelevant. The moment he attempted to delay or manipulate, the system had already accounted for it. Money no longer held him as leverage. Because I removed leverage entirely over time, a subtle transformation occurred. Harry, frustrated by his inability to disrupt our stability, began making more desperate attempts. He sought sympathy from mutual friends, shared selective anecdotes of difficulty co-parenting, and tried to reassert influence over Noah's daily life. I responded not with confrontation but with invisibility. I allowed him to see the results of his actions without intervention. In the quiet, our home became a sanctuary he could not penetrate. The most profound change was in Noah. He thrived in the newfound structure, unaware of the power struggles swirling around him. Meals were regular, sleep schedules maintained, and laughter filled our days. I watched him build confidence, try new foods, and explore creativity through drawing and storytelling. His world was safe because I had engineered it to be unassailable. Harry's influence became increasingly irrelevant, a storm outside a window he could not break. By the time Noah's 5th birthday arrived, Harry's attempts had grown visibly weaker. He posted images online, but the impact on our lives was minimal. I no longer responded or accommodated him. Our routines remained intact. My professional life had stabilized. Freelance projects were thriving, and my employer had taken note of my unwavering reliability. Noah never understood the battles behind his daily smiles. The triumph was ours, lived in ordinary moments of peace, a bedtime story read without interruption, a bowl of cereal shared at a calm morning table. a drawing pinned proudly on the refrigerator. These were victories no one could see, but they were absolute, and as for Harry, the storm eventually passed. He continued to appear in images online, but his power over our lives had ended. My life, once dictated by his interference, was now governed by my choices alone. Stability, once fragile, had become unbreakable. And in that quiet, I realized the most extreme battles do not always end with fireworks. They end with the simple, steady assurance that you can survive, thrive, and protect the ones you love. I continued by strengthening the routines we had established. Noah's mornings became a ritual of calm efficiency. Breakfast at 7, backpack by 7:30, out the door by 7:40-5. His daycare drop-offs were timed precisely to avoid unnecessary overlap with Harry's unpredictable visits. Evenings were a fortress of consistency. Homework, playtime, bath, story, and bed. Every element was predictable and reassuring, a pattern that could not be disrupted by external chaos. Financially, I built layers of redundancy. I automated all recurring payments, maintained a buffer account for emergencies, and monitored any transfers meticulously. Harry's attempts to manipulate money were rendered powerless because I had created a system that anticipated every possible delay or disruption. The fewer surprises I faced, the more control I reclaimed over our lives through it all, I observed. Harry's efforts to regain influence. He sent messages filled with vague complaints, posted images online of staged bonding moments, and tried subtle manipulations through mutual acquaintances. But the difference now was stark. His attempts no longer caused ripples in our lives. They were background noise, irrelevant to the well-being of my child or the stability of our household. The most important change was in Noah. He was thriving, growing more confident with each day. He did not notice Harry's manipulations, and he never needed to. He simply experienced a life filled with structure, love, and predictability. I realized with quiet satisfaction that the ultimate victory over Harry was not confrontation, legal action, or public exposure. It was ensuring that his interference could no longer touch the most important parts of our lives. By the time Noah reached kindergarten, our life had reached a new equilibrium. Harry remained part of our narrative, but only as an occasional visitor whose actions no longer held power over us. He had become a minor character in the story of our lives rather than the antagonist who could control its course. I began to notice the freedom this stability offered. For the first time in years, I could make decisions without anticipating sabotage. I could plan vacations, explore hobbies, and invest in my professional growth. I could enjoy my child's milestones without calculating how Harry's interference might derail the moment. The liberation was subtle but profound. One Sunday afternoon, I watched Noah run through the small park near our apartment, laughing as he chased a butterfly with complete abandon. The sunlight caught his hair just right, and for a moment, everything seemed still. In that silence, I understood the true measure of my victory. Not in confrontation, not in retribution, but in the life I had built that could withstand chaos. Without fracturing, my life was no longer dictated by another's whims. It was governed by choice, structure, and love. And in that quiet victory, I realized that the most profound triumphs are often invisible to the outside world, yet absolute for those who live them. I had become the parent, the protector, and the architect of our life. And nothing, not even Harry, could take that away.